Okay, friends, we're gonna, I want to just say a really brief introduction to John Cutro. One of John's main partners is a person I know even better than John, and that is a guy named Dennis Mosley. And Dennis is at our focus breakfast every Wednesday when I'm there. And I don't know if he comes other days too, but Dennis continues to work for with and around the district attorney,
Public,
the public defenders,
which has just
not the
recently
district
changed.
attorney. Yeah. But John is just got a lot of story himself in Albany. Maybe some of you have run into him before. John Cutro has been involved for many years with restorative justice practices here in Albany. And since we've been talking a lot over the last month, 5 weeks about reconciliation and repair, we've looked at it from the angle of scripture. We've looked at it through our own tradition. We actually also looked at it through Greek philosophy. That was a really interesting conversation. And we looked at it through the Jewish tradition. And now we've been talking a little bit about how it plays out, like how we practice it and live it. So I asked Dennis, and Dennis asked John, he said, wherever I go, John goes, to come and talk to us about the work that they're doing in Albany. And we are going to talk about that. But John had a suggestion about how we begin that conversation. And I want to hand it over to you to get us started.
Sure.
I hate for this to interfere.
One of the things that I do as part of my practice is that when anyone asks me, would you come and talk about restorative practice and relational practice? I say no. It's kind of confusing to people who always thought you were one of the quote people who does a lot of that. And I said, that's true, with emphasis on the word does, as opposed to talks about. And anybody who has familiarity with 12-step programs, I am in recovery from being someone who talks a lot about restorative justice. And I don't need to relapse. So I will come and do something that gives people a much better idea than a didactic or theoretical explanation. In order to do that, starting out today, I'm just going to use a simple question, and usually I break people up into groups of 3 with 2 other people you don't know that well, which would be a near impossibility if it's room. But I don't want to have to get people up and going. But you could just pick a couple of people near you and just reflect on what Peter Block, who's a colleague that I, co-presented at in international trainings and stuff. He wrote a book called Community: The Structure of Belonging. And it is really has a lot to say about what it means to build a restorative community. And one of the things that he says, and I'll pass these out, but I prepared these for actually a civil disobedience training that didn't quite happen. It had to be rescheduled. But it's that questions are more powerful than answers. Good ones get us conversing in unaccustomed ways that connect us to each other before we attempt to collaborate. And then, so I'm going to put out one personal, stressful, and ambiguous question for you to talk about that will intentionally talk about in your group of 3 for maybe a couple of minutes each, taking turns. And then at the end of that, I am not going to ask any one of the groups to report on what you talk about. I am going to instead just ask, how did that feel? And so pay attention to how you feel in your group of 3. And then I'll be asking people, if you want to report from your group of three, how it felt, stand up, say your name, and say how it felt. And my guess is we won't have to do that too many times before we say, is that what was in the room? Anybody else have to add to it? If not, that'll be a connection exercise. So, and here's the question. A pregnant pause. What is the crossroads you find yourself at in this room and at this time and in your life? What is the crossroads? Because we're always at a crossroads. What's the crossroads that you find yourself at in this room at this time? And if you ask me what I mean by that, I will do what I used to do with my kids when they asked me to change my mind. So, in your group of three, what's the crossroads you find yourself at?
Yes, and you said it, but flip it around. Thank you. Yeah.
Here.
Are you both Elizabeth?
No, I'm better. She's Elizabeth.
You're like, oh.
Yeah. Two different decades. Crossroads. Beth and I were just speaking about the fact that you're both relatively, we're newly establishing ourselves. Be a little less lonely than you, and I don't think that's me for you. At least in mind. So, yeah. I was saying geographically, but I did speak for you once, so I don't need to. There may be a different precedent. And I'm about to retire in a month or two. I'm gonna cut that in my second, and it's not a month away, it's still here. Yeah. Yeah, and we're at similar trust. Yeah. So. How about you? How about you?
I've been here for not from the prairie.
No one.
I'm here.
Did you say son?
Two granddaughters.
So that's
And that's my gift. Oh, that's my granddaughter.
How long have you been Plus, why do you feel the need to choose among those things? You do feel the need to choose, I think. You do feel overwhelmed with that. I wonder, yeah. Yes.
If you're from this area, that is from.
Yes.
Airport makes it. There's garden all around.
Okay, this is in the large. You've got a huge truck.
Anyway, I said. Stop.
Oh, great.
They are proud of her.
There's a program this week, I think, that Tuesday is doing a presentation with writers. Is it? Okay, so it's a month away. Okay. I knew I had seen it, yeah. Okay. She is a former EPA person. She is amazing. And there's a program in the area called Writers Institute, which is run but you can go online, Writers Institute, and she will be giving a talk. And I mentioned that because your transition, so that you're retired, you're one turn, what am I doing? And that's they bring, that brings a lot of really interesting stuff. And she is,
Oh, wow.
she's a great speaker.
You can finish up in another minute or so, another minute to finish up if you haven't
They
already.
said, "Hey, your feeling is over, what? What?
Right, but the other part of this is that, we thought that. They know there's Pennsylvania, just because, ADHD, so it's been very. And he's showing this, I didn't figure out the transition from high school to adult.
That's the big that's the real and it's feeling is one very I get it. Our feeling, did I accurately call yours, overwhelmed, worried? What's my feelings? Yeah, okay, over a minute.
If you're.
I'm more curious than I am. I mean, I'm worried about the world, but my personal frustration is marketing. I'm not.
If you can see me, do what I'm doing.
I understand.
If you can see me, do what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people can't. See.
Yeah. A mix of joy and, yeah, a mix of joy.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I do is a thing called practice inquiry as part of restorative training in the schools and prosecutor offices, defense, etc. And often people will come up and say to me something like, what do you think the measures of success should be for this program or this activity or whatever? And one of the community schools, this is going back 5 years when I was doing training in the Albany City Schools, we said, well, what are the meaningful measures you think I should be doing? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll ask some questions. What's the group? It was parents, parents would come for meetings, at the school. And they said, well, what happens? He described some of that. I said, what happens at the end of the meeting? And she said, what do you mean? I said, what do you observe at the end of the meeting? People, the parents don't want to stop talking and they don't want to go home. Those are your meaningful measures. Count that along with how many people showed up, all those kind of things you have to keep track of. What your agenda was, and to document those things. Right? If those are your meaningful measures, then count them and report them. Because I don't think people wanted to stop talking, did they? Okay, so now the other part is now, if you feel so moved, please stand up as someone from your group of three, say your name, like I'm John Cutro, and this is how it felt to be in my group, and share that with the group. And we'll just keep doing that until we find out what's been in the room. It won't necessarily take every single group, but we'll find out, right? So who wants to stand up, say their name, and say how it felt to be in your group of three with that conversation?
I'll start. I'm Elizabeth, and in my group, John, it certainly felt that we had just barely started to scratch the surface, and then you were saying we had 1 minute left. So, because we were really just becoming better acquainted with our with the transitions that we're experiencing at this time. So it felt too short. That's the.
I'll stand up. So slow standing up. Getting to, I say I'm Leah, and in my group, it felt like I felt a feeling of goodwill. Like everybody wanted everyone to have success in the crossroad they were picking or what they were thinking about.
Sure.
I'm Darren. We all had very different crossroads, but we all kind of related and empathized with the situation that each of us described, and it was good.
I'll say one thing. So I was in the same group with Rita. I think there was a lot of.
What's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just took for granted that you guys knew who I was. John, I don't need to have a conversation with you. You remember me. So I thought we had a Willie White. I'm sorry, Willie White. I'm one-time member of Westminster Presbyterian Church here. I'm so happy to be here. I thought we had a lot of commonality in our group. We kind of experienced the same thing in a lot of ways, although we had different crossroads. And one day I'd love to talk to you guys about my crossroads. But there was a lot of commonality. I won't promote it. It was beautiful.
And the way that my conversation made me feel is a little bit upset, kind of. Not just because of the different problems that all of us shared. Just, I didn't really know that kind of stuff about guys. And it was really interesting to see that like we all have a struggle, that we all have something that we're dealing with.
Sure.
It felt really, it just felt very comforting to know. And it made me realize I want to be a part of that more. I want to see more of that, us interacting with each other and seeing each other. And being there for each other.
Amen.
I'm Ned Trudeau, and I can only speak for myself. I had a marvelous feeling of almost relief to share with two other people what is currently in my mind as crossroads.
I'm Lynn, and in our group, my feeling was, it was really, maybe the word is comforting, to be able to say the challenges out loud and be heard by other people that felt supported.
I'm Paul, and I guess in my group, I felt that there's a lot that we haven't yet unpacked. That we could, with more time, might have been able to. And I felt that we're all struggling with similar but different issues. Sure. But we hear each other and we are connected that way.
Build on that. So I felt a little long-winded. It turned out I had some serious crossroads. But I felt very heard and surprisingly relatable. And yeah, with more time, as you mentioned, I felt like we really would have unpacked a little more. But I feel very heard, and I can feel the compassion in the room.
I'm Margaret, and I'd like to second what Lynn said.
Anyone else want to bring something else into the room of how it felt?
She said that.
Or is it pretty much, we now have a sense of what was in the room?
Yes.
You can do this with 1,000 people in groups of 3. And after 5 or 6 people stand up, no one else has to stand up because, oh, so do we have to go through all 300 groups of 3 to know what is in the room? Not only a few are necessary. Whereas if they were reporting, okay, we would be there for a week. And that's what we'll probably do next, because I have 23 more personal, stressful, and ambiguous questions. But these are very useful things. It's called the 6 conversations. And the one that I'll just quickly name the conversations and pass these out later, because we did the possibility question. Crossroads question is one of the conversations that has several questions, personal, stressful, and ambiguous associated with it. There's the ownership question, about how much ownership do you wish to take. There's a dissent question, which is really important. What are your misgivings and how to communicate that in a way that isn't about one of the things is resignation, because that's not the same as dissent. Commitment, what is the things that you won't do? What does it mean to keep your commitments? What does it mean if you fail to keep your commitments? And then one of the most important, and these can take place in any, is what gifts? What are the gifts? So the first one is just the convening part, and then there's possibility, ownership, dissent, commitment, and gifts. And there's a series of these that you can use for a lot of situations. And you just took on the possibility, one of the possibility questions. And as Henny Youngman said, I got a million of them. But kind of, how many people don't remember Henny Youngman? He was the king of the one-liners. I got a million of them.
So when John and I talked about this week to prepare for this hour, John told me about this conversation and then I asked you this question. Okay, but I was hoping we'd talk about restorative practice. You know, it's like the alternatives to incarceration, alternative dispute resolution, how are we working for, and you know, like, why are we doing this at the start of that conversation?
I'll connect it for you. I often think that the conversations that we have about all of those kinds of topics, they are very interesting. They also have a lot of basis in research and data. And I also believe they are not very powerful. They're not powerful in transforming us in here and even in here in using different ways of thinking about things. Like what you just did in this room is an example of relational restorative practice. And it will not usually happen in a diversion case from prosecution. It can happen in the circle that may be the result of that diversion, where a lot of this kind of sharing occurs. And it is that kind of sharing that occurs, that is the part that's restorative, that is like what just happened in this room.
I remember one thing you said to me was that restorative practices are based on this idea that we restore community. And in order to do that, there has to be community to begin with.
Correct. I basically admonish people that relational restorative practices is this about connect, converse, collaborate. Don't make the mistake of reversing the order. Because we often say, what can we do to collaborate to reduce this caseload, to make sure people are owning responsibility for the harm that they did, even that one. How do we make sure that that happens without the connection that happens first? And often connection has to happen in a circle restorative process about incredible harm that people need to express their anger, their resentment. They have to get that onto and into the conversation. And that other forms like mediation suppress human emotion. Relational restorative practices allow for that to be a part of it, so that people can freely express in ways that do not contribute to the harm. They're very strong feelings. And a transition happens towards surprise. I had no idea, to more positive things. That's the conversation part. But people have to connect first, even if it's over very strong negative affect. People connect over the strong negative affect of the impact of wrongdoing. And that is the beginning of any restorative circle or process. Is what happened. And then just like what happened to you, which may involve historical trauma. Okay? Of the persons responsible for the harm, as well as those who have been harmed. And then conversation occurs as distinguished from communication. There's a big difference between communication, which right now I'm giving a bad example of. I'm communicating to you without hearing a lot back. Whereas the conversations you have had in this room with each other are different because they do this instead of this. So connect, converse, and then you may be ready to collaborate.
Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, sure.
Question, John. Who are the groups you work with or individuals? Tell us about your work and how you, who are the people you apply these techniques with?
I'll give a kind of broad sketch that covers my experience.
If you might need to speak just a little
Oh.
bit louder for everybody.
I'll stand up then too, that usually helps. I'll just give you a broad sketch of, I first got involved in relational restorative practices back in the early 80s when I got trained, and used it in training schools and other things. And at some point, I used it at Homeless and Travelers Aid in terms of how we work with people who were, facing really serious challenges about their housing, food insecurity, et cetera. And also who were in conflict with the wider community because of behaviors on the street that the police kept arresting them for. And so we did circles about things like that. And then I made a transition to, I felt a calling when they were seeking homicide investigators for the New York State Capitol Defender Office to go and be engaged in capital punishment. And so I took a job doing that, and they hired me specifically because of my experience in restorative practice, and we actually used it in death penalty cases. In one example, the Wendy's massacre in 2001 in Queens, I worked with the surviving victims of that. And also worked with the prosecution on how do we get the people who have been harmed the things that they need from the defense and from the prosecution in ways that help with their healing process. And so I did that with the New York State Capitol Defender Office until 2005. And then used it in training in the school district over a few years with Connie Fenton and Dennis Mosley and others. And now Dennis and I have been working quite a bit inside the refugee welcome community over on Elk and Sherman Street in that area, just that one block area. That's really a place where we work with the youth, the adults and others. And I might want to give you an example of how the application of restorative relational communication and processing worked in a potentially violent incident that was emergent there.
Yeah.
Open to do that?
Yeah, please.
All right, we were met with the youth every, once a week, and I was going over some of the more, elements of restorative practice, those training things, but then
Can I just interrupt you? I want
Sure.
to make sure everybody understands the setting of where John is talking about doing this work. It's on Elk and
it's at 104 Ontario Street is the Refugee Welcome Center.
do people know where that is? Kind of on the West Hill neighborhood. If you went up towards Albany High School, kind of over on the side of that.
Yeah.
And in that neighborhood, it's become a very mixed neighborhood where there's new families. A lot of them are Afghan who have moved into that area with the help from this group, Refugee Welcome Center, which isn't just a community center. They own a bunch of housing and they've rented that housing to people, to refugees.
Yeah, at below market, Tim Doherty had an idea of, he grew up in that neighborhood, his parents were from there, and he said, I'm gonna find people to invest money, I'm gonna invest my own money in rehabbing this housing and renting it at below market and providing services as well. Their English as second language, food distribution, cooking classes. And part of it was also restorative justice engagement about when that community was threatened from the outside by people who did slashing tires, breaking windows, because of the conflict with the neighborhood community.
Everybody understand the setting and what the conflict was
Yeah.
there? Okay,
And
so
there's a
with
very
that,
legitimate conflict between that community and the surrounding communities. And the reason for that conflict is racism that hasn't been addressed. Is that people who were getting services, immigrants in that area, were seen as, why do you get this when for 350 some odd years, we ain't got, you know what, in the surrounding communities, and it's legitimate. It's a legitimate concern that's unaddressed. And part of it, we're looking at, how do we replicate what was done in this block in the surrounding communities and zip codes that, and this is one of the things Dennis wanted to bring today, he can come back to bring more of it. Essentially, it's the worst place to raise a child of color in the United States. And the health disparities, and whenever he brings it up, blank stare. And that, you know, that's the history of racism in this community. And so in a sense, one of the things that we would like to address is how do we replicate what's been done in the context of where are the funds going to come from? And where is fairness in this picture of all of Albany? From the history of the brothers, were the precursors to the Black Panther Party, who protested all kinds of stuff about inequality in rental and disparities there. And Dennis did a lot of stuff with them. He's one of the last brothers.
but tell us the story of the work that specific work that you.
Yeah, I do want to inject with that. So the surrounding communities seeing subsidies come in. This Tim Doherty, to clarify, those funds he personally invested, but there were subsidies making it so that it was worthwhile to him. But he was not a member of the council or anything, or did he influence the council? Is one of those two things at least true? He influenced the council, or there were council people involved, or was this?
No council people, and this was private investment of his own personal funds. And Dr. K, I can't remember her last name now, but she's a retired physician who had a lot of assets to be able to contribute to that, as well as others in the community who came and made those purchases and rehabilitations possible. That's all private funds. The city takes no responsibility.
Well, they let them do it, so.
Yeah, well, put it this way, they didn't even support them in terms of dealing with some of the issues with code enforcement, et cetera. The politics of Albany keep getting in the way of people doing their jobs that they're supposed to be doing. And it is biased by racial disparity.
My biggest question too, I meant to, so when that violence was happening, how did you educate, or how did we, if it was ever solved, the, because obviously that's a kind of a hostile environment, unfortunately.
Yeah, so tell us the
I'll tell
story.
you one story about what we did in response to a potentially, and this was Afghan group versus Afghan group. So it wasn't with it was with surrounding community. But it started with a conversation over social media where the word beginning with a B and ending with H was used in a text. And so what escalated from there was unknown to all the youth who were participating in it on both sides. None of them really knew what was happening as to why the other group was going and putting Orbeez guns in their trucks. You know what an Orbeez gun is?
No.
No, it is one of those CO2 pellet guns, and the Orbeez are the things you're supposed to put in plants to keep them hydrated. But if you put them in those guns and you freeze them beforehand, you can do some actual physical damage to a person shooting it at them. So they got their frozen orb and they put them in the trunks, and they were going to come over and they were going to do drive-bys, and they had done drive-bys. And so I got the youth group got together, and I said, so what happened? That's the first question in restorative practice. What happened? And they all had different versions of what was happening. And so I said, okay, let's do a diagram on the whiteboard of who the players are. That's kind of traditional. You probably see it in homicide movies on TV where the cops put up the thing. What are the connections or relations? Because all of this is about relationships with people and groups. And so they diagrammed it out and they kept adding pieces that the other ones in the room, even though they hung out all together, all thought they knew what had happened. And at the end of it, I asked, well, what did you, with the takeaway from what you're understanding now at this point? None of us knew what was happening at the time. And minute to minute, it kept escalating without us knowing what was happening until people were ready to shoot each other with the Orbeez guns, maybe knives, and maybe even guns would have been involved. So I said, what stopped? Okay, and they said, well, that was when, and I won't name the woman, one of the well, two things stopped it. Number one, because of the work Dennis and I have been doing over the last couple of years with restorative conversations, going into people's homes, asking them what was going on, how can we make a difference here? People on the street were not afraid to come out and say, we are watching what is happening here. That community came out. And the second thing is one of the moms said, God, and she walked down the street and she actually shooed the other group off the street. Time to go home. Now, the police probably wouldn't have had that effect, okay? But the respect that the other Afghan group had for that mom, they left. Now, other things happened after that, and the conflict never completely got resolved, but the potential outcome that people recognized could have happened is that within those two Afghan communities, it wasn't the youth that were going to come out with a 9mm and start shooting. It was their older cousins who had been at war and were going to say, enough is enough, and if this keeps up, somebody's going to get shot. And that got stopped because the mom told them, no, stay out of this. And so in a sense, that communication and the fact that we did many circles in people's homes over the past 2 years, it created a community of care. It created what Block says is a restorative community. One that says, not only can we try and repair the harm that has happened, but we can use these conversations to prevent future harm. Because that's the other piece of relational restorative practice. I'd like to say that this was able to continue, but because ICE came in, people are afraid to come out now. People don't come for English as second language as much anymore. We had 4 people scooped up and removed from that community by ICE, right from the mosque. And people are in fear. So the work needs to be done. It needs to be replicated. It needs to be fair. And it's not fair because we're mostly working in that one block area. And we don't have any more funding either, so we just keep doing it anyway. But it's harder to do because now we have to do all of it inside people's homes. It's hard to get people to come out to the meeting, but they still do.
We just have maybe 5-7 minutes left, so let's just take a few minutes to hear comments, questions. Yeah, Willie.
I would love to start. We've had a wonderful conversation about restore, repair, and restorative justice and everything. I was a long-time worker with Dr. Alice Green, who worked tremendously a lot on restorative justice. John, I don't know if you remember, when I first started the village, you and I were together a whole lot together. And it was good work in our community. But I think one of the things that blocks us from progress is that we're afraid to have the tough conversations about restorative justice. We all month long, we use the word restore and repair in land. We use restorative justice here. Repair is a root word that constantly stays in my mind, and it comes from reparation. When you truly want to repair something, you put your blood, sweat, and tears in it, and everything that you have to make it right, to restore. And that's what America did to the African American people here. They've never really apologized, never truly apologized for slavery. And how do you fix it? How do you repair it? How do you repair it? Until America is willing to answer that question and really recognize that happened and it hurt a people. To this day, it hurt a people. We have to repair. And we're going to go around in circles, our perpetual motion to have these wonderful conversations without really addressing the issue.
I'll just give a quick example within the Quaker community, and my memory, but there's a Quaker community that pondered that question: how can we do reparations? And after they realized we have a lot. This was a wealthy congregation, and we are going to eliminate the debt of people of color, their medical debt. That is what we will do as a expression of reparations. As opposed to, and I'm not going to say which, but let's write a letter and go to a Black church that is our apology for what we have been a part of as white supremacy culture. That's to me is better make sure you understand you're welcome with that approach because the other approach is what substantively can actually be done to improve and repair past harm in a way that is seen by those who are receiving it as actually useful and helpful. That criteria has to be applied.
Definitely.
We had a potluck this week on Wednesday and talked about reparations. Kelly and Lynn and I were part of that. And out of that conversation, one of the main takeaways is we want to bring that conversation to this whole community that we started on Wednesday. We want to have, after Easter, have a second hour conversation about it. And I'm sure more than one, but there was a lot of energy on Wednesday night to see if we were talking about another church that had taken some steps towards financial reparation and talking about how we might be involved with that. Other comments about restorative practice, about the building the restorative community.
Are you personally like in a segue right now where there is some, like you said, there's efforts being put in that neighborhood? Is it more of the volunteer basis, or is there grants? Or are you in a segue where we'll be seeking support?
We are seeking support to continue support for what Dennis and I do there, but that may or may not occur in the current funding climate. But even in private domain, one of the things that's done in the public domain is that you can show a return on the taxpayer investment. It'll save money in terms of reduced hospitalizations for shootings, et cetera, to have violence interruption work done in a preventive way as opposed to a reactive way, which 518 SNARF, there's great reactive stuff after a shooting, after somebody's got a knifing or a wound. But in terms of what we do to prevent that from getting to that point a year before a potential incident could arise, there's not much support for that. Prevention is, at one point, it was even prohibited in the federal budget to do prevention work, to fund prevention work. So, at least in certain domains. So I guess the answer to your question would be is, there is nothing that it can all be done without a penny of investment. This is one of the things Peter Block says: stop letting, oh, we don't have funding for this, get in your way. We have all the resources that we currently need in terms of human beings, starting with those in this room, to make things happen without a penny. Now, that doesn't mean you won't have to dig in your pockets for, a thing here or there, but the point of the matter is it can proceed. We need to proceed as if it can happen without funding.
That's probably a good note to end on, and just like we said about a couple of our groups of three, we're only just getting started
Now,
with the conversation.
now I have a question that I'd like to end with that people can respond to, that I got in a lot of trouble for. It was when we were trying to get funding for ceasefire, which has become 518 snug. And these meetings where we were, doing all this, and we had the former mayor was at those meetings, and I would always ask at the end, I said, before we leave, I want us to go around and say, what are you taking with you from this meeting, that something someone said that inspired you, or that will be useful to you tomorrow in a way that you didn't expect or surprised you? That was the simple question. Oh, no, do we have to do that? Okay, because it takes up a lot of extra time and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, I kind of would push it, and then people would do it. And yeah, no, that was different. And then one day I wasn't able to be at the meeting. And of course, I didn't think they'd ask the question. I said, no, let's do John's question. Because that kind of a question is the glue that binds people together at the end. Because in the same way, we didn't know what was in our other two partners' lives at that time. It brings into what was in the room for this meeting in a way that's kind of a glue that binds us together. So I will just start by saying that the thing that I think moved me the most was in my group of three, learning something that was very common for, I'm a cancer survivor and may still be having another possibility. Those things are at my crossroads, and so what I'm taking with me that really inspired me is the ability to connect with people I didn't know before in a way that was actually meaningful, and that's what I'm taking with me. So anyone else want to share? Not everybody has to speak, but what are you taking with you?
Just please forgive me for ducking out. I hope you'll all stay and answer John's question. I'm leading worship at Beverwick at 1 o'clock, and so I need to split right now. But thank you.
Very well. So anyone else want to share what you're taking with you that inspired you, that someone said, or that you feel like?
I would just like to say, I really liked hearing from Julia. And a refreshing, honest young voice. Nice.
Well, I'll just say that it's marvelous that we're doing this, period.
Yeah.
Well done.
I'm inspired by you.
Yeah, John, it's so good to see you again, man. I mean, it's been a while. It's been a while. You've been fighting the good fight for a long time.
Yeah,
A long time.
I got a little bit interrupted when the car hit me 3 years ago, but I'm bouncing back.
I think you and I worked together with Chief Krolkoff and Chief Cobb.
Yes, yes.
Yes, very
Chief
much
Cobb,
so.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, now I have a takeaway because, excuse me. Well, yeah, I have a takeaway now because I was rear-ended, a year and a half ago. And, I was amidst, I still am in a very, very serious spiritual journey. And, to have been taken out and be forced to watch the world go by is, it was humbling when you least expected it. At the same time, forces resilience. So, and both my parents are cancer survivors, by the way. And I just want to throw that out there now for relational purposes, but yes, continue to persevere. And if you don't have these meetings regularly, maybe at least monthly or something.
I want to get on the tag of cancer survivor. That would be
Wow.
Yes.
I'm still fighting.
Anyone else want to share? I want to be respectful of people's time as well.
Connect, converse, collaborate. Did I get them in the right?
Yes.
That's the right, okay, because that's the one I want to take
Yeah.
home.
When you're dealing with activists, like I'm organizing what's happening on the 28th from 11 to 1, and other people are doing from 1 to 3 at another location. It's activists just want, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna get it done? Let's get the list. It's like, but let's connect with each other more. And so that's one of the things is don't get the order mixed up. And I kind of force the order to be
You know, it seems like you have the necessary structure, or you're trying to make sure it's in place. And because that makes it more, the solidarity of the group also does matter, right? It's like, oh, we go for this event and then the group isn't as connected, and then it can fizzle off, you know?
yeah. And we'll have Singing Resistance there, which emerged from Los Angeles, Chicago, and Minneapolis. We'll have Singing Resistance, part of Albany Singing Resistance. And they'll be doing 3 songs for the rally, and then along the march route as well, which are very easy to teach and learn and do on marches and rallies. And they're very positive and they connect people.
While people are doing their final comments, do you want me to pass those papers out? Did you?
Oh, yeah, this had some of the questions. It was for a civil disobedience training that had to be postponed. But these are some of the questions from Peter Margaret. Also, if you have an interest in being a safety marshal at that March 28th from 11 to 1 at West Capitol Park, we have a training tonight for the last of the series of trainings for safety marshals to be safety marshals at that event.
Safety.
Yeah.
For me, the experience affirms once again the power, the effectiveness of allowing people to talk about their unique situation and discover that other people have something very similar. And it builds you know, power with individuals. If people are allowed time to talk about their situation, it's always effective.
So we're shy about 6 to 7 pages of this. If anybody wants to just take a picture of it with their phone.
And also I gave Heather 8.5 by 14 that Dennis supplied, that could be duplicated at some point.
Okay, I'll talk to Heather and I'll ask her to make copies, and next week could do that.
I want to thank everyone for coming and be respectful of your time to go and do other things. So if you have any questions, I'll stay around for a while. But thank you.